We're having a very British video today, ladies and gentlemen. A very British vehicle built by a British company that has something very British under the bonnet. That is a 4.4 litre JCB industrial engine. This is found in low doors, all kinds of industrial equipment, usually big, bright yellow machines. And it's in my big, bright blue machine. That right there screams, I'm going to last forever. I'm going to pull any trailer through a house. And I love it. An occasion so special, I have put on a shirt. Squirrels. Oh, I've got shoes on as well. I always wear shoes. It stops my feet getting wet. This Land Rover is a 1988 110 Defender. It started life as a 2.5 turbo diesel, but when I purchased it, it had a 200 TDI engine. I really liked the 200 TDI engine, and I wanted something that was similar, but how can we put this without being rude? Reliable? There's going to be a lot of 200 TDI fans literally throwing their oily rags at the screen now because they are quite a reliable engine, but everything has a service life, and I wanted to put something in this that had a serious service life, like 10,000 hours kind of service life. So that's what we did. Let's talk about the build then. The Land Rover has been extensively rebuilt. It has 5 new doors because the original ones were rotten. It has a brand new galvanised bulkhead because the original one was rotten. It has a new galvanised chassis. Guess why now? Because the original one was rotten. It has a new fuel tank because the original one was rotten. And it has a new engine. Actually, the engine was fine. We didn't really need to change that. It has got fully rebuilt axles, which you'll see. I'll probably put some clips in at the workshop. It's me again, and we're in the workshop all of a sudden, as if by media and film magic. Yes, this is a real spanner. Starting at the front, we have the JCB engine. It's quite a big unit, isn't it? We've had to make a custom sump and a custom sump adapter. So these two sections here that you can see, the sump itself is like a nice thick billet piece, O-ringed around the top. And the adapter that sits above it allows that sump to be mounted across to one side. In addition to having to relocate the sump, move it over a little bit, we've had to extend the bump stops down slightly. They're, I believe, 25mm further down, so that this axle, when it travels, doesn't hit the sump. Now, don't despair, off-road fans, because although we have moved the bump stops down, the suspension has also been lifted. The suspension lift is 2-inch and the bump stop extension's a little over 1. We still have more suspension travel than the factory, which is good, isn't it? All the room we need not to clatter the axle against the sump, and we've got good off-road ability, because that's one thing we don't want to ruin on a Land Rover. Axle that sits directly underneath it, looking all shiny and beautiful. Now, this is the original axle out of the 1988 Land Rover that this is. It was stripped, powder coated. It had some phosphate coating before powder coating to prevent corrosion. The full internals of this axle were upgraded. Hardened shafts, joints, limited slip diff installed, new swivel balls, seals, wheel bearings, basically everything, diff carrier bearings, everything has been replaced. Pinion seals, the whole 9 yards, because I wanted that to be reliable. The brakes, even though there's a little bit of surface corrosion on them, they are new also. They're a ventilated disc, like off a newer, like a Puma Defender. Moving back, this is where you really start to get to see that beautiful paint job underneath. Now, we'll come back to the paint job, because it really is nice. From the JCB, this custom sump that we've had to make, that's the original JCB bell housing. And then here we have an R380 Stumpy transmission. Now there'll be people screaming at the screens now saying, JCB will blow that gearbox to bits. Well, I don't doubt if you tune the JCB engine it could, but it certainly won't with the power that we're giving it. Have a look at tuned TD5s. Have a look at the horsepower and torque that tuned TD5s make that run stock R380 gearboxes. This is not a stock R380 gearbox. This is an upgraded one with stronger bearings and some other internal upgrades. So it should last better than that, potentially with less power. The idea of this build is not for maximum horsepower, it is for a fully British and reliable machine. The next thing you might notice if you have a sharp eye is there is no position here for a release bearing to go. Because the bell housing's quite wide and large, we've had to make our own bearing carrier for the transmission to carry a concentric slave for the clutch on the rear. So it has a concentric slave inside there, and it's actually really nice. Even though this has powered brakes and powered clutch, yeah, you heard that right, powered clutch, and with the powered system turned off, it still is actually quite nice to press. Following on from the gearbox, we have the transfer case, 1.00 3-to-1 ratio, and that allows a real life 85 miles an hour top speed. I think that's quite sensible. A plant engine that's not had its engine rev range modified, I think that's actually really good. What we can also see from underneath here is this nice stainless steel 3-inch exhaust system, back purged, all TIG welded, and it has two silencers. One thing I didn't want from this build was a loud exhaust. I didn't want it to drone, so that was very important, and I'm really happy with that. Now moving on to the back. Salisbury rear axle. The original axle was a Salisbury, but it was a drum type, and we've put in the disc type Salisbury. The brakes are now fantastic. Well, they should be. All the brake lines are replaced, pads, calipers, everything. So they should be. We've got Terra Firma suspension as well. This is just the standard Terra Firma stuff with the lift, with the 2-inch lift. All poly bushed, same as the front end. We've got a brand new fuel tank, under shield on it, and it's also got a new sender in it. You can sort of feel the theme going on here, can't you? Everything's pretty new. Look up, directly up at that. Wow. Whoa. Look at that. Whoa. This 4.4 litre JCB engine is brand new. Well, I say it's brand new, it's actually 2013. It's new old stock. Fundamentally, this engine is as the factory intended. This is 150 horsepower of 4-cylinder Fury. The torque number, 600 Newton meters as a guide for this engine. More than enough to get this Land Rover moving. The plan with this is something to test out the engine platform. We're not trying to break any land speed records. We basically want this machine reliable, do all the things that a Land Rover did by using a new, larger, more durable engine platform. So we had to do a few things to make this engine fit in. If you look at the back there, you can see a billet mount with the ECU connected to it. The original JCB ECU is mounted down here towards the chassis rail, which obviously we could no longer utilise because of the chassis rail being in the way. We've had to create a charge cooler system for it. I like the charge cooler systems. They give a lot of cooling stability, especially off-road where you've got slow air speeds on the front end. I like the thought of when the engine moves and it shifts around, the charge cooler actually moves with it. It's not trying to pull an intercooler pipe off. You will probably recognise this style of airbox from our normal G-Wagon and Land Rover builds. And this airbox has basically been integrated into this large inner wing. So the air that's coming from the outside can be sucked through there, cleaned through the airbox, and then this nice 4-inch tube. That means there's room for improvement in the future. Not saying that it'll happen. So the engine, although we're known for doing mechanical diesels, is actually common rail. I know, it's hard to say. It's hard for me to actually get it out without a little sick coming up. It can benefit from things like cruise control, and cold starting on this is pretty easy. There's a very interesting thing about this. Obviously, being a 4-cylinder and a large capacity engine, it has a rather distinctive tone. When you first hear it, you would almost mistake it for possibly a 1980s Land Rover. You kind of hear that 4-cylinder tractory noise. When you were a kid, heard a Discovery going past down the road with a 200 TDI, and you couldn't quite distinguish it between a smiley-faced Transit or a 200 TDI Defender. Well, it's not quite as harsh as that, but it certainly has that 4-cylinder tone about it. But the other interesting thing about this engine, being a Tier 3, it has a rather unusual camshaft. So rather than having emissions controls on the outside of the engine, EGR coolers, DPFs and all that kind of thing, they actually altered the camshaft lobe. On the exhaust stroke, it bumps open the inlet cam. It sends the exhaust into the inlet and then eats it back again on the inlet stroke. Why? For emissions reasons. And emissions reasons never really make sense. But the weird thing is it has quite a throaty tone because of it. So I'll give you the mic and I'll let you listen to that. It's quite interesting. There's certainly no mistaking that JCB engine sound, is there? Next up, how do you make a large industrial JCB engine fit into your old Land Rover? Well, it's not that easy. Bulkhead wise, I had to do the most minimal of trimming and made a really nice little plate. You might be able to see it. You can just see it. If you stand here at the front and you point down there, hang on, I'll go around and point. You can see a small grey sort of moulding. So that's a section we made just to be able to allow that SA3 JCB bell housing to be able to just fit in that tunnel. So that was the first thing we had to do. I made a few extras of those. So if anybody does decide they need a JCB engine in a Land Rover, I do have the piece to do that. So the height of the JCB engine is a bit of an issue. It's probably 200mm taller than we realistically wanted it to be. We had to do a couple of things. One is a custom billet sump. We did that to reduce space down low. Then up top, a custom bonnet. To most people, this bonnet does look just like a regular Puma bonnet, and you can hear it is steel, it's not a fiberglass replica. Puma bonnet wouldn't simply fit over that JCB engine. What we had to do is create a jig, a large steel frame, and then a hydraulic press to basically push the central section of this bonnet up to basically raise the bulge, which wasn't as straightforward as it sounds, which you can probably imagine. It actually caused the bonnet to wrinkle. So it had to be then cut, repanelled, welded back together, and then all dollied up. So quite a lot of work went into the bonnet. But as you can see, if you have a close look at it, from the underneath, it looks very normal. You can see I've cut a small notch out here. You can see that I've taken this section out here for the airbox room. But apart from that, all the inner structure is factory. The whole inner structure with the outer skin was stretched. And the sections that were cut, which were kind of here, can just be seen to trained eyes. This bonnet I painted just recently. I don't profess to be a paint expert. I think it works okay for a Land Rover. The rest of the paintwork on this car has been done by two different people. Me initially. This car was originally brought into the workshop and we said, right, we're going to do this with the JCB. We want it to be super smart. I basically built a jig to lift the body up so that I could strip every bit of under seal and all the years of paint and all kinds of nonsense that was underneath. Strip that all back. After the underneath was totally stripped, it was obviously primed, and then the body colour was painted on the underside. I sent this whole vehicle with the new doors, with the new bulkhead and all the other bits and pieces to Dark Side Paint and Body, and they did the top side of the car and they did the inside as well. So all the inner floors, the inside of the roof, the body, the doors, everything like that. So basically the underside I've done, the bonnet I've done, the rest has been done by Dark Side Paint and Body. And to be fair, I think they did a very nice job of it. Right, come on, let's have a look at the interior. I wanted to keep this very English, late 80s, 90s kind of interior sort of thing. I didn't want to go with the usual tan interior with the stitching and a wooden steering wheel. And the majority of this interior is Exmoor's finest. Exmoor Techno trim with the deluxe bucket seats. These are heated. In the rear, we've also got the high back seats, I would call them. They are what the vehicle came with, this style of seat. So I was keen to retain it. Exmoor trims carpet set throughout and a brand new Land Rover headlining. All the inside of the headlining and all the sides of the panels and everything have been insulated with a sound and thermal insulated barrier to keep it nice and comfortable and quiet. The trim that goes around doors and the windows, all that's new. New rubbers, new rear windows, new fuel cap. Everything's new. It'd be easy to explain what isn't new, I think. Do you want to see what's in my back door? Oh, and look, to carry the spare wheel so it doesn't pull the hinges off. You didn't expect to see that in a classic Land Rover, did you? A very thorough thought process went into this, because I know what you're looking at those and you're thinking, ha, boy racer. Well, yeah, I do like horsepower and I do like going fast. And this vehicle has neither. So I thought, well, I can just listen to my Jean-Paul, can't I? Nice and loud. For those that are, because there will be guys out there that actually, oh, I wonder what they are. For those that are interested, that is a pair of DB Audio T-Rex 12D subwoofers, dual 2-ohm. The amplifier is a Hyphonics Brutus 35th anniversary. Works out at 1,700 watt RMS at the ohmage we're running it. It's pretty loud. Do you want to hear it?
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4!
So a very important thing with a conversion on a Land Rover is to keep as much originality as possible so that the vehicle can be repaired in the future. The powertrain in this remains in its stock location. From a transmission and transfer case point of view, this could be repaired all over the world with standard Land Rover parts. And I like that. We've talked about the engine, we've talked about the paint, we've talked about the new chassis, axles, gearboxes, interior, and a killer sound system. But what we haven't done is taken it for a drive. Everybody's going to be wanting to know, what does this industrial engine powered Land Rover drive like? Well, come with me, let's have a look. They're quite easy to get into. To say that it is quite a big machine, just like any other Land Rover. Right, seatbelts on, most importantly, heated seats on. Should we go for a little spin? It even sounds like a 200, it kind of sounds like a big 200 TDI. It's kind of like noisy but not loud, it's hard to describe. And like any gear, it's got a clutch booster on this, so that the clutch is lighter, because it has one of our heavy duty clutch kits from the big horsepower stuff. That gives us our engine display information. It's not rowdy, it's 4-cylinder diesel. And this little gauge here tells you my throttle load at the bottom, so you can see how much I'm giving it. Should we give it full? See what boost pressure it makes. Ooh. Oh no, we're not even at full, 90%. That means there's a little bit more lead in the pencil. And it feels really good at that. That heated seat's starting to get nice and warm now. Loving that. This vehicle, as I'm driving it now, weighs 2,200 kilos. Now that's lighter than a new M5. And this is a big 4-wheel drive vehicle with an industrial engine that's going to last a lifetime. I think that's pretty good. And it makes some progress. The performance is fantastic. Handling's really nice. No timing belt, no timing chain, timing gears. Sound system, diesel goodness, an engine that'll last forever. I might be cursing things here. This may be the perfect Land Rover.